Hi, my name is Teresa Koblak, and I have been working on these cuff bracelets. So this has one of my paintings in it, and then I take and I put resin over top of it. So let me go ahead and show you how I did this. First thing you'll need is something to paint on. What I am painting on is the craft plastic. I picked it up in the 12 by 12 and I cut it down to the size that I need. The next thing you'll need is a cuff bracelet, and you'll cut your paper down so that it fits into your bracelet. So you want to do that before you paint it. And we're going to set this aside, and we'll go ahead and set these bracelets aside. The inks that I'll be using today are made by Ranger and also TREX. They do work well together, so being that they play well together, I figured we'd use them together. And this here is my little bowl with 99% alcohol. And let's just go ahead and get started here. So when you're painting a longer painting like this, it is a little bit harder because you do want to pay attention to all of your areas, but you also want to pay extra close attention to that center part because that's going to be the center of your bracelet, and you will see that all the time. So I'm just going in and grabbing some ink and just kind of putting it out there. And I am using a fan brush to do this. And I just want to kind of figure out what I'm going to paint. I really didn't have a plan. Just kind of like to start and see where it takes me. Go ahead and tip that up and bring our clouds on down. So while I'm doing this painting, I actually have my resin set up on the side, and I'm going to pay attention to it because I want it to have a nice consistency where it's already setting up, and then we'll go ahead and start putting it onto a bracelet. So I do have that setting aside. I suggest for you that you already have your painting done and ready to go. And then you'll put your resin on as you're going. So we'll just go ahead and finish off this painting here. Just kind of see where I want it to go. Sometimes it's nice to just paint it and not really think about it. And then sometimes it's good to have a plan. So I'm just dipping into my 99% alcohol, picking up a few different colors. Just to make it kind of interesting. And I just kind of keep watching my painting. So this is basically like if you were to paint a regular painting, just in a smaller, you know, you're painting it smaller so it fits into your bracelet. So I kind of like that. I always like putting the water in. So we'll say we'd like something like that. And this is just, you know, just kind of a quick demo. You know, you can keep going into details by putting in some rocks or shrubbery, maybe some grass. So I just wanted to show you, so when I am painting my painting, I'm painting it from side to side and trying to pay attention to my centerpiece here. So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside. I'll probably come back in and add a few more features right down in this area and here, add some grass, maybe put a couple of birds up there. So this just gives you a quick, basic look at how I paint the painting. So put that up there. So last night I had painted a couple of paintings. These were the ones that I painted, and what I'll do next is I'll decide what one I want, and I think we'll go with this one. So you can see when you're putting your painting on, you see how I was saying about being more focused on the center here. I mean, we see our little birds here, but maybe we should have put them over here, but I kind of like it. So then what I did after I painted this, I made sure it was dry, and then after it was dry, I took it outside and I gave it a couple of light coats of the UV Archival. And this is all I'm using now. I am finishing up my other spray on my Ranger, but so if you've watched my previous videos, you know, that's a Ranger ink I was mostly using. Now that I'm using the TREX, I only can use this, and this actually works great because it is giving me the varnish and the UV at once. So what I did is I took this outside, gave it a quick spray. You never want to spray it in your house. Then what we're going to do is you'll let that set overnight, and then we're going to glue this on to our bracelet. And to glue it on, I'm using the E6000. I'm only putting a small amount of glue. So your E6000 and just a small amount of glue. And I'm actually only gluing it down here at the end. And put my cap back on so my glue doesn't leak out. And check my resin real quick, make sure my resin isn't setting up on me. And then I'm going to take my painting and I'm going to tuck it in. Now I did do my painting. When I cut it, I made sure it was nice and tight so it would snap in there. I'm actually going to use a little tool to help poke it in. And then I'm going to take and bring this around, and I'm going to push it right in there. And if you don't have nails, use a use the end of your paintbrush. Use something to poke it in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this one, so I have that in, and I'm going to leave that dry. So I do want to make sure my painting is all the way pressed down, just because there's a little edge on there. And it's all seated in there. I want to make sure the whole thing is seated, and then we're going to let that dry overnight because I want this glue to set up, is the reason we're going to let that dry overnight. So I'm going to set that aside, and the painting that we'll put the resin on is this one. So I painted this, and then I put the UV varnish on, the archival varnish, and so then I let that set, and then I went ahead and I put the glue on and glued it in there, and I let that set, And so now it's ready for a coat of resin. So you can see my resin is still quite thin. If you haven't played with the resin before, this isn't really a good project to be your starter project. I think you should try a different paste just because this is somebody, I think more for somebody who is a little more experienced in the resin area, just so it's not your first piece. And so our resin is going to set up a little bit longer, but what I'm using here to put my bracelet on is, this is actually what you would put on your in your cabinets. It's kind of a rubbery, foamy, and this works perfect. And then I just took and I put a piece of duct tape on there to hold it over, because our bracelet doesn't actually touch, as you can see here, the cuff bracelet doesn't touch the bottom, and when we put our resin on, it's already going to be setting up. So this works perfect. But what we're going to do is we're going to let this set up a little bit longer, and then I'll be back with you. All right, see you in a few minutes. Okay, so here we are back, and actually while I was waiting for my resin to set up a little bit, I actually went in and detailed my painting a little bit more. So as you can see, I paid attention to the center here. I put my birds in the center. I did a little tiny bit here, added a little rockiness into the shoreline, and I'm going to call that painting quits. I think it looks pretty good like that. So I'm going to set that aside. Here's the 3 bracelets right here. These 3 that I did the other day that already have the resin on it. And this one here is the one that we put in today. So I just keep an eye on this glue and make sure that it isn't puckering up. And I just kind of watch my edges right here. So this one here, I'll let set overnight, and then I'll go ahead and put the resin on it tomorrow. So this is the one that we're going to add our resin to. Again, it's been glued and all ready to go. And I had put the spray sealer on yesterday. My resin is getting thick and it's getting ready to set up. So I know that I should be okay, and I say I should be okay. You never know. You could start something and it doesn't quite work the way you'd like it to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take, and I am working on a piece of plastic, and I'm going to just take and start putting my resin on. And I'm going to put a nice little gob of it on. And I'm just going to take my popsicle stick and just pull it. And I want to try to get as close as I can to the sides with my little wooden stick here. But I am going to take my heat gun on it to help get the bubbles out. And when I do that, it will help push it over. So I'm just putting a really thin layer on. And you'll just want to keep working it on. Add a little bit more and keep working it over. You don't want to put too much on one at one time, just because you need to pay attention to where it is going. So I'm going to look back here and make sure it hasn't traveled too far. So this is the first time I've done one of the bigger cuff bracelets. And I did spend a lot more time on my painting. So it's up to you, you know, if you want the bigger one or the smaller one. I'm going to come in with my smaller popsicle stick. I can see I have a little bulge right here, so I'm just going to bring that down. And again, I want to make sure I'm getting as close as I can to the sides. And as soon as I have the majority of this covered, I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun on it just for a second, help pop out some of those bubbles, and it will actually help move my resin over a little. So again, use a resin that you're used to, something that you know how to control. And I let my resin get to the point where it's almost starting to get tacky. And I'm just coming in and picking up small amounts at a time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take my heat gun to it. Now, when I take my heat gun to it, I'm not going to talk while it's going because you can't hear me. But also, I want to let you know that I'm going to take and turn it over like this here because I don't want my resin to run over my little metal bars here. I'd rather, if I have too much resin, I'd rather it come to this end here and drip off, or I can take it off with my popsicle stick. Okay, and I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can. It's running right here. I have a little thick there. I'm going to grab a clean popsicle stick. Just going to go ahead and pull some of that off. And then I'm going to take and just move this over a little. I want to make sure that my whole painting is covered. When you are doing this, you'll want to do it on a day that you have a little bit of time, because it is a little more time consuming. And I'm just pulling it over, making sure I get my edges, and I can tell I got just a little too much there, so I'm just going to pull that off right now. And I'm going to go ahead and heat that up a little bit more. And I'm just working a little bit at a time. And go ahead and pull off a little of that extra resin. It did drip on my plastic, and that's why I got my plastic down there. So I just want to make sure all my edges are covered. The heat gun helped take out those air bubbles. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to watch it. Keep my eye on it. And just kind of turn it back and forth. It's setting up fairly quickly, but I still want to pay attention to it. Now, after I know that it's not moving anymore, which may be a couple minutes, then I'll go ahead and set it down in a plastic tote. And when I set it down in the plastic tote, it'll help from getting the dust in it. I'm not going to seal the lid all the way on. I'm going to have the lid cracked over to the side. But that way it'll help keep the dust particles. And if you have fur babies at home, it'll help keep their hair out. And I'm just going to keep an eye on this. So there we go. We did a cuff bracelet. So in the beginning, I showed you how to do the painting. Oops. And then I showed you how to glue it on. Remember, because we are using the TREX, and this is also nice because it's one coat, you want to use the UV Archival Varnish. I use mine in the gloss because I like it. Let it set overnight. Then go ahead and put that E6000 on, glue it on, let it set again, and then go ahead and put your resin on. I suggest using a resin that you're used to. And if this video was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up. And that lets me know you'd like to see more tutorials. And subscribe if you haven't. That's all I need from you. So again, my name is Teresa Kovlak, and I certainly hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great rest of your day and happy painting.